Right then, welcome back to the Snatch Chat Podcast. This is episode, what are we on now? 28. I want to say this is episode 28, but it could be episode 27. I can't fully remember. I fancy that. So, let's get ourselves ready to go. I'm just sorting out the questions. Where are my questions? Here they are. So, we have a bunch of different questions. It's quite a lot on technique this week. So, shall we get ourselves started? So, question number 1. Why does the bar drift forwards in the snatch? And how do I keep it closer to my body? Now, if you're saying that bar is drifting forwards, I'm assuming that you mean that it's coming away as you get into your extension of the snatch. It could drift away in different positions, but often it's drifting away. Well, actually, let's look at the different reasons why that bar might be drifting away at different parts of that lift, because all different parts, it means different things. So, firstly, if that bar is coming away from your shins in that first pull, so from the floor to just above your knee, often that means that you're probably pulling with those arms. Those hips are shooting. You're not maintaining the angle from hip to shoulder, so your hips are shooting. The knees travel back now that all that weight is sat in those arms. Okay? So if that is the case, what we need to try and do is potentially slow down that start position. Pull that bar in, set our back, so we're thinking about engaging our lats, squeezing the shoulder blades together, and almost treating the movement like a leg press. I am pushing that floor away, allowing my legs to do the work. I'm maintaining my nice strong back, my arms stay nice and long through that first phase. Now, the knock-on effect, if that is happening, as you get that bar against those thighs, that bar will come away from you because you're constantly having to fight to get that bar in. And then it's almost like a domino effect. Like I've said over the last sort of like couple of episodes when we've had questions like this, is that a problem that happens mid to end of the lift, 9 times out of 10, happens at the start of that movement. So you've always got to look at that start position. The start position pulls you out of the mid phase. The mid phase then, because you pulled out of line, that's going to then change your extension point. So what we've just gone over there is that the bar comes away from your shins, you're then having to work overtime against those thighs. And the knock-on effect then is you're often jumping forwards. If we are allowing that bar to drift out in front of us, you'll probably find that your hips are getting pushed into the bar and you're not engaged in your upper back and the arms then just follow out, okay? We've got to try and get that bar to be locked against us. So, there was always a thing, like, I remember when I was learning and it was all about like hip contact, and then like there was a shift in mindset where it was like, no, hip contact is bad. And there's probably, and that was definitely in sort of like CrossFit, and you know, the excessive hip contact comes in. And now in weightlifting, you need to make good contact with the hips, but there's a good way and then there's a bad way of making hip contact. Now, I always put it down to these two things, and it hopefully tries to simplify it a little bit, is that it's never hips to bar, okay? It's always bar to hips. We are pushing that bar into our hip crease. We are never trying to drive the bar into the hips. If you drive your bar, or if the hips are moving towards the bar, you're going to push it out, creating that bar to then rebound out in front of you and create that loop. Instead, we kind of constantly think about pushing that bar into our body. Our upper back is really crucial here because we've got to think about pushing it in and staying nice and tight in my back. I want to almost feel that bar lifting up my t-shirt in extension. But you won't get that if you drive your hips into that bar. So there's the two different reasons. Question number 2. Should I think of the first and second pull as 2 separate movements, or one continuous one? So the whole movement, like I've said this many a times, and I always go on about it in any sort of like technical stuff that I put out on YouTube, Instagram, or even in like the school communities, that the Olympic lifting movements, the snatch, clean and split jerk, are just 3 big jigsaws. And those jigsaw pieces all need to interlink. So, what you've said here, should I think of the first and second pull as 2 separate movements? Yes, because they are. You've got the first pull and the second pull, so they are 2 different movements, but the one thing that you've got to try and do is bleed into that movement. So our first pull sets us up to the perfect second pull. The second pull then comes into our high hang position. The high hang mimics the extension. So wherever I go in my lift, I'm always looking to try and get back to my previous position. That being said, is I don't want you to think of it and it be a rigid, rugged movement. First pull, stop, find my next part, then go for that movement. The best way to iron this out is, for example, if it snatches or cleans, is a top-down movement. Start at the top, feel that weight on that descent through those positions. The bar paints my thighs, I feel my shins, I set myself up with a nice tight start position, I can feel my upper back being engaged. Can I flow through those same movements? Top-down snatches are really, really good for that. I've got a client actually where the one thing that she was doing in the snatch, and it's one of these, and it's not always something that you need to spend a lot of time on, and it's just trying to shift the mindset. So she'd set up for a snatch, and as soon as then she'd start, the bar would get pulled off the floor, she'd then lift the shoulders and step back. So her angle was constantly changing through that first phase. One movement that really helped this, because you haven't got time to think about changing the angle, is a top-down snatch. You start the top movement, as it says on the tin, you control into that lift, the bar kisses the floor, and you go through that same lift and execute the snatch. And by just doing that for literally 1 to 2 weeks, you can already see how it's improved that snatch. Because every time now she sets up for a snatch and the bar's on the floor, I'm like, right, stand above that bar, set yourself up almost like you're holding an imaginary bar, control in, grab the bar, and then go for your lift. And sometimes it's more about trying to shift the mindset and the cue that resonates with you rather than trying to fix a problem. So I've deviated from that question, but yes, they are all separate movements, and you know, that's how I would learn the Olympic lifts. But there's going to be a point when we've got to try and stick these jigsaw pieces together, but get them to fit nice and flush. We don't want it to be rigid and rugged. One piece finishes, the next piece starts. We want it to flow, and often it's speed that we don't need. We need to slow it down and feel that movement first. Next question. I keep coming onto my toes too early in the snatch. What drill actually fixes this? Snatches. We don't need to come up with 1,000,001 different ways to fix a problem. If you're coming onto your toes too soon, we need to have a higher focus on mid-foot pressure. Things that are really, really good for that. Again, top-down snatches. It might be tempo snatches, just slowing down that lift so you have time to actually think about pushing through the midfoot. But then you want to also probably look at movements that are going to supplement the snatch. So that would be things like floating snatch grip deadlifts, and even like paused snatch pulls, okay? Because I'm assuming is if you're coming onto your toes too soon, it's once you're past that knee. So pause in that position, highlight the weakness, and a pause movement is really, really good for that. I would probably start off doing top-down snatches and tempo snatches. As I get really good at those movements, I would then test it with pause snatches and full snatches and see if I can then, create that snowball effect and intensify the variant of that movement to actually make sure it's nice and solid and it's set in stone. Next question. What's the best food or drink to have 30 to 60 minutes before an early morning session? It's really hard to say. I had a question like this. Was it last week? That I don't think there is a certain meal that is going to be something that you should all eat. Okay, do I have a question like this? Yeah, what should I eat before a 6 a.m. early lifting session? So, it's a question that gets cropped up, it crops up every now and again, but what's the best food or drink to have 30 to 60 minutes before an early morning session? You've got to try and find what works for you. Now, as a general rule of thumb, things to think about before a gym session, we want to look at a stimulant, so a caffeinated drink. Not everyone likes caffeine, so that's absolutely fine. But caffeine is really good at just sort of creating you to be a little bit more alert, and that's obviously needed in Olympic lifting. But I would look at like fast digesting foods, simple carbohydrates. That might well be we don't want anything to sit heavy onto us, so you probably wouldn't look at having a big stodgy meal like oats. It's probably something that you want. It's probably better after you work out if you're training in the morning, or something you're having, probably before 60 minutes before that session. But 30 to 60 minutes before the session, we're looking for like simple, fast-acting carbohydrates. So things like Rice Krispie squares. It might well be bananas, rice cakes with jam. Might be saurine. Just things that are going to give you that boost of energy. And is going to sit nice and light on us. We don't want anything too stodgy and heavy before our session. So 2 things to think about: caffeine, simple carbs. That's simple. Next question: how do I know if my snatch grip width is right for my build? Now, there's a general rule of thumb, but it's never black or white. And I think that's the thing with weightlifting, is that I can't stand here and be like, this is the only way. There's no one way. There's not only one way to skin a cat. There's 100 ways, or a million of ways. But you've got to try and find out what works best for you. So you go by the general rule of thumb, and then you adapt it for that individual. So the way I would tell someone to find their snatch grip position: they hold the bar, they kick their legs in front of them until they find, and they're going to carry on taking their hands wider, until they find a position where the bar sits into the hip crease. So when they kick their legs in front of us, or in front of them, they're not going to feel that bar against the top part of their thighs. That would probably be your grip position. Now, if you've got super long arms, that's going to sit a little bit lower, so you might need to take your hands a bit wider. But then you run the risk of, I'm at the collars now because my arms are so long. So you're going to bring your hands in a little bit, but you're going to slightly adjust the way that you would lift. So as you go through that second phase of that movement, you probably will have a little bit more flex in the elbow. So you're not pulling that bar, but you're having a flex to the elbow. So as you get into that hip crease, you're making a closer contact to that hip joint. The only reason I would say that you want to sort of flex in the elbow is that if you don't and you keep your arms long, but that you're at the collars and the bar's making contact with mid-thigh, as you extend, that bar's naturally going to come away from you. So there's a general rule of thumb, but it's that sort of grey area where we go, okay, but we've all got different arm lengths, we've all got different torso lengths. We've got to then adapt and customise that to the individual. Next question. I get really gassed in training sessions. Is that a fitness issue or a programming issue? Whoa. Man, you're asking me these questions, and I like them because they're really good questions, but I don't know, like it's really hard. I don't know how you train. This is someone from the school community. I don't, it's hard to say. Things to think about is, do you feel generally unfit? Are you doing anything in your program that is fitness related? Things to think about if it is fitness related is, are you doing a set and it's taking you a while to recover? That would obviously then indicate that it's probably more of a fitness thing. If it's a volume thing, or the programming, are you finding that you're doing really well until you get like 45 minutes into a session and then you're falling off the cliff? That would be then a programming issue. Now, I've got a client and he's been coping really well with higher volume. He's mid to late 20s. He can cope with volume. He's from a Brazilian jiu-jitsu background, so fitness is not the problem. But what we've found is that once we've now started getting to that 85 to 90% mark, he can't cope with that volume. So next week we've plummeted that volume right down, so it should be a lot easier for him, so he can action good quality sets, and then we'll look to try and squeeze an extra set the week after, if we can, or we stick it the same. So it's really hard here. There's ways to look at whether it's fitness. Are you struggling to recover? That's probably the biggest thing. And when I say recover after the session or recover between sets. If it's a programming find or it's a programming thing, are you finding that you get to somewhere in that program and then just fall off a cliff? Or you've got 7 sets of 2 on snatches, it's going really well for the first 4 and then it's absolutely diabolical for them thereafter. It's probably more of a programming thing. And this is where it's really good to work with a coach. So I know I'm a coach and I'm here to promote coaching and help people lift, obviously. But you get a second opinion. Someone to actually sit there and be like, no, we need to make these changes. It's not this is okay, and the reasoning why I think this is okay is because X, Y, and Z. And you can have that conversation. Without that, you are sort of just pissing in the wind. And I am exactly the same, you're probably only going to work towards your strength. It's never going to be a weakness. Now, if it is a fitness thing and you're programming for yourself, you probably won't stick yourself on a 20 to 30 minute movement circuit or 20 to 30 minutes on a bike because it's boring. But you'll be able to sit with a coach and be like, I don't want to do that, but what can we do? And then start to manipulate it. But if you're working on your own, you're not going to do it. You're just going to work to your strengths. You'll always have that weakness in the background. Next question. When the bar feels heavy in the warm-up, how do I decide whether to push through or adjust the plan? Now, when the bar feels heavy in the warm-up, how do I decide whether to push through or adjust the plan? If it feels heavy, you're never going to get over that in weightlifting. The idea of the sport is that you're lifting heavy weights, maximal loads, okay? So it's never going to feel light. There's always going to be days when it feels heavy. You're going to look to adjust the program if it feels heavy and your technique is off. But if technique is there, but it just feels heavy, you probably got to carry on pushing through that movement. The only one time I would look to make an adjustment is when things are starting to fall by the wayside, we're stepping forward, bending the elbows, technique is breaking down. That's when we want to pause and look. But again, and I remember saying this a couple of weeks ago, is that your warm-up is there to prime you for that session. Now, I've done it before, that you've worked up to a certain weight on the bar, which is just below your working weight, and it feels shit. Some people will go, it feels shit, but I need to move because that's my starting weight. No. Bring it back, go for that lighter set, make it feel electric, then go back to that weight. Then it's going to move better, hopefully, and then you're going to go into your working sets. Your warm-up shouldn't just be a linear, go from light and we never move, we just constantly get to our starting weight. You might find that you've got this little wave that you've got to go, so you've got to sort of take it back 1 to 2 steps before then you can carry on pushing it forwards. You need to do what you need to do to prime yourself for the session at hand. Simples. Next question. What's the difference between a pause clean... What's the difference between a pause clean and a pause clean pull? What's the difference between a paused clean... read the question wrong. What's the difference between a pause clean and a low hang clean? Well, a low hang clean is going to start just below the knee. A pause clean, when do I use them? So a pause clean, you can pause in different variations of that movement. It might be below the knee, above the knee, mid-thigh, hip crease. So you can manipulate the pause clean to focus on your weakness. A low hang clean is a low hang movement. So you're not going to pause in that position. You'll find the start and you'll go straight into that lift. So a low hang is going to highlight that low or transitioning past the knee, making sure the weight is through the midfoot, you're holding good positions, and then you're driving hard into that second phase of the movement. The paused variant is good at breaking down that specific weakness where you actually need to fix. Right, question number 9. How many sets and reps should I be doing at 70 to 80% in a technique focused session? Again, it all depends. So between 70 and 80%, things are relatively light. They shouldn't be that challenging. You're going to be between somewhere like 15 to 30 reps. Maybe more, but probably optimally between 15 and 30 reps. You can do more, but again, we sort of go back to the question of, can you maintain that volume? Can you maintain good quality of movement at that? There's no right or wrong. It's never black or white. You've got this grey area, but for me as a coach, I'm always going, right, 15 to 30 reps per, between that 70 and 80% mark. 70% I'm probably going to be towards that 30, maybe a few more, but as that percentage builds, the volume will naturally come down. Intensity builds, volume come down, intensity drops, volume goes up, and these are two constantly interchanging cycles. So again, there's no real right or wrong when it comes to that. And then question 10, I train alone most of the time. How do I make sure I'm actually improving without a coach watching? Now, you need to set things up in your program or create a logbook of events. So the simple ones is that you're going to keep track of volume weightlifted for sets and reps. Okay, so you can see whether it's a 1 rep max or a PB, a rep max, or it might well be it's a volume max. I've never done 5 sets of 2 at X amount before. But then you need to make sure that you're filming your movements, so then you can assess your lift technically. Okay, are you moving back better at X, Y, or X amount of weight, and adjust it like that? But yeah, I think you've just got to set yourself little mini goals within your program and different ways to assess improvement. But they're the 2 biggest ones. Rep maxes and video footage, so you can actually test, or you can put video next to each other and go, yeah, okay, I'm moving better than 70 kilos is moving a lot better than it is here. I've got now a tighter position. I'm staying through my midfoot more. Because you'll probably find that sticking these videos together is the thing that you're going to do more throughout your cycle than you will testing your 1 rep maxes, in my opinion anyways. But that is the end of the podcast. So it has been a relatively short podcast this week, but we've got some really, really good questions in there. And it annoys me at times when I've got to sort of it differs between person and person, but that is the truth. I don't want to sit here and be like, no, or it's black and white and this is the answer. What I try and do within this podcast is okay, that's a generic question. There's loads of different avenues that we can go down. Let me tell you some of the different avenues, just so then the different people that are listening can hopefully resonate with those different avenues that we take. So hopefully that you find it really, really useful and you can actually take things away. And even if it isn't your question, but it resonates with you of one of the avenues that I've answered through that, or you've gone, oh, actually, that question is focused around that because I've gone down a different avenue and that sticks to you. That's brilliant. At the end of the day, the Snatch Chat Podcast is here for everyday lifters that just want to get really good at Olympic lifting, that just want to improve their technique, enjoy the sport for as it is, and lift as well as they possibly can. With that being said, that is the end of episode 28 of the Snatch Chat Podcast. Bring it on. We are nearly at 30 podcasts. If you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends or other lifters so we can actually just keep on building this platform. And I shall see you in the next one.